All right. So thank you again. My name is Manisha, the Director of HPA. Thank you for joining me for Interview Week. Today, we're going to be talking about preparing for your interviews. And I know prior to the recording, we just chatted a little bit about where all you all have applied for, and that you are current or future applicants. But I do have questions. I do ask questions throughout. My first question really is, why do you think schools interview? What is the point? They have already read your application. You've all spent time writing statements, secondaries. So what is the point of an interview? Yeah, thank you, Angelina. They want to know more about who you are and how you fit into their school and class. Assessing your professionalism. Anything else? Communication. So as of up to now, you've really been what I call a flat profile, two-dimensional character based on your writing. And so they want to know how that looks like in person or in communicating with you. Absolutely. So thank you for that. Just a fun slide. This is usually the range of emotions that happen when somebody gets an interview, from excitement to, oh no, now what happens? And that's what the point of today is to talk a little bit more about that. For the purpose of the rest, until we come back to Q&A, I am going to turn my camera off just so I can focus on the presentation and not get distracted by my own movements. But I am here. So a lot of times, if you come to any HPA events, we continuously talk about competency-based application, and that holds for interviewing as well. You are still sharing, different aspects of the competency. So if you are not a pre-med applicant, and you Google AAMC core competencies, these 15 words come up. And regardless of health field, this applies to any pre-health applicant, and that is what you're trying to communicate. Now, in trying to communicate it, it doesn't mean you're saying I have service orientation because I did these things. Like your writing, through what you share, how you share stories, how you share your answers and responses, you are demonstrating these competencies and attributes. This is what they're listening for. And as I mentioned, and as you've answered, interviewing up to now, you've been, a pretty flat profile. They've read about you. They're trying to picture you. They're trying to understand your voice and what you offer. But the interview is really, an opportunity to both evaluate your readiness, for both the profession and school. Your grades, your scores, your writing got you up to here. Now they want to really meet you and understand, what do you offer? How aware are you of your desire to pursue your specific health profession? How aware are you of both the positives and challenges of pursuing the health profession? And more about how you fit with the class they're envisioning and creating. So that is why many schools and health professions interview you, is really readiness, maturity, how you communicate, your awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of issues surrounding the health profession. Any questions thus far before I move on? All right. So let's talk a little bit about the basics and what your interview day can look at. So one, your interview day, whether it's in person or virtual, is completely planned by the school. They will inform you what your day or days look like. And we'll talk more about virtual, but in virtual interviews, We are seeing, multiple day interviews with different components of the interview spread out. You can either be interviewed by a faculty or current student, and there are different formats that your interview can look like. Your day or your interview process can also have a combination of different formats. I've listed a few: one-on-one, panel, small group, MMI, or even pre-recorded, but I wanted to hear from you. What do you know about any of these, or what questions do you have? One-on-one, as I go through them, it's more of what we consider the traditional. You're sitting across from someone, whether virtually or in person, they're asking questions, you're responding. A panel is a group of people interviewing you, or a group of you. So a small group can be you with other candidates being interviewed by an individual, or a panel, several faculty or students coming together to interview you as a group. Multiple mini interview, MMI, you'll hear this a lot, is a series of smaller interviews conducted, usually, 5 to 10 short interviews ranging from 5 minutes to 10 minutes long, where the questions may vary. And then pre-recorded, which, thank you, pandemic, started a couple of years ago, where the interview questions or the interview is conducted over a platform. You record your responses, you send it back to them. So these are the different formats, and I would suspect that your interview, based on school or health profession, can be a combination of different formats. An interview can also be open versus blind. What does this mean to you? Have you heard these terms before? What's an open versus blind? Absolutely. Absolutely. So open typically means they have had access to your application, not always your transcripts or test scores. That's not usually part of what is sent over to interviewers, but they have access to the written components of your application. And I'm going to emphasize the word access, meaning we hope they would have read them, but they have had access. So with an open interview, and why this is important to know, is your questions may be more application specific. So instead of generic questions, they may ask you something very specific to you and what you've written. So your responses also change accordingly. And then a blind interview, they know nothing about you. They know you've garnered the interview, that you've been given an interview, but they don't know anything about your experiences. And so again, the nuanced difference is your responses might have a little bit more breadth in them in terms of what you're sharing with the interviewer based on what they're asking you. So open, they have had the opportunity to read your application. You'll have, they may ask you more application specific or you specific questions. Blind, they generally know nothing about you other than you've been given an interview. In the past, it's typically been, if it ranges, faculty would have access to your application, and then the health professional student who's part of the interview doesn't. But I have been seeing in this last interview cycle, sometimes medical students, specifically for medical school interviews, have had access to some written components of the application. So it's evolving. It's evolving. A school may not tell you what the interview is like, if it's open versus blind. That's not something a school will typically tell you, but they will tell you what your interview day is like. Sometimes they might tell you 2 weeks out, sometimes a week out, sometimes shortly, a couple of days before your interview. Every school varies on when they might share information about you, about their interview day. You're always welcome to ask, but that's when, you know, they do vary. This is also the one time and one time only that I might say it can be helpful to go to studentdoctor.net. If you've met me before, you know I consider this the bane of all applicants. It's just gonna, you know, make you more anxious, but this is the one time if you go in with laser focus to see how that specific school interviews and back out, that can provide some insight to what you might expect, especially if you're waiting to hear back from a school. But I would, again, laser focus, go in, find out, get back out. Don't spend time reading about all the different things or opinions people are putting out there. So let's talk a little bit about preparation. At the end of the day, you need to be ready for them to ask you about anything. It can range from academics, activities, your employment, what you think about healthcare challenges or ethical issues, and why do you want to be in the specific health profession, and why do you want to be in healthcare in general? There can be follow-up questions. So based on how you respond, they may ask something for you to provide more depth in your answer. This tends to happen with more behavioral type and open file questions, where they may dig a little bit more to get to know you and your opinions and values about something. It is really important that you know your application material. So for all of you who applied earlier in the cycle, how long has it been since you actually looked at your primary or secondaries? A month, maybe more. So given that in many cases, interviews can go from August, September, all the way through April, I don't expect you have your application memorized. I don't expect that you know what you've written, both in your primary or your school specific. So it's really critical as part of your preparation that you're looking up, what did I actually write to the school? What did I write in my primary? To avoid just lack of awareness. So brush up on it, because it's okay to pause before you answer to gather your thought. It's completely different to have a face of, ooh, gosh, I don't actually remember that. Don't assume you'll remember it. You won't. If you are a medical school applicant, you've applied to about 30 schools. You aren't going to remember, even if you recycled some material. So review it. The example I like to share is many moons ago, I had a young lady who applied to a school and happened to get a faculty member who was conducting similar research that she had done as an undergrad. And she was a couple of years out of school. And this research faculty had started asking her about protocols and such, because he was so excited to talk to someone who was doing similar research or had done similar research. And he asked her about a very specific protocol. And it had been 2 years. And she sputtered and eventually said, honestly, I don't remember. How do you think she felt, and how do you think the interview went from there? How would you, not good. Not good at all. She probably just completely deflated, which she did, because she came back in tears telling me the story. And here was someone who was like so excited to talk to her, who her answer to something was, I don't know. And so I encourage you, and that is part of your homework when you get an interview, is to, just like you did with your application and secondaries, you set aside time to write and to write school specific. When you get an interview, it's the same thing. You need to set aside time to, one, remember what you wrote, refresh yourself of it, but also practice. So when you think about questions, when you think, and we'll talk more in a few minutes, but when you think about preparing yourself, you want to think, practice, learn, and connect. Think about examples, evidence of your past that speak to those competencies we talked to. Practice your stories out loud. We all sound good in our heads when we answer questions. The art of a successful interview is, one, practice out loud. Listen to your nuanced voice. Listen to your inflection. Practice how you're conveying a response. Record yourself. Listen to it. Ask friends and family to listen to your responses, and just like you would have asked them to read your application. Learn everything you can about the school via social media, websites, current students, info sessions, blogs, about us. Read about current events in healthcare, ethical issues. And then when appropriate, as you're responding, connect these back to the school or the field of medicine. Not everything's going to connect back, just like with secondaries, but where it is appropriate, you do want to connect it back to that school or your field that you're going for. That is what demonstrates to the listener that you know exactly why you're there, you're confident, and you're able to convey why you're a good fit. But those are the things: tell your story, answer the question, and tie it back when appropriate. So talking a little bit more about research, as I mentioned, look up everything, get on their website. If it's clickable, click on it. If you took notes about them when you were doing your secondaries, review that. Remind yourself why you picked that school. Remind yourself what your interest with that specific school is, and be able to talk about that. Brush up on current issues. With the pandemic, a lot of things came to light, but every health field has issues unique to them. Read what's been going on in the news for the last 6 to 8 months. These are what the current ethical issues are. So look up what's been in the news, look up what's been making headlines, and be confident speaking about them and having an opinion about them. Be able to answer why you are a good fit to that school. What value do you bring? So it's not so much why you want to be a blank, but what value do you bring to the field? What value do you bring to this specific school? They want to hear your specific reasons, and not just like with questions, why'd you pick the school? What about our school? They want to know that they all know you've applied to multiple schools. So what about them? And they want to hear that you understand that. Hema, good question. Journals, healthcare journals are a good place. Most online news sources have a healthcare or health related section. I don't watch the news much, but this would be a good time to think about, reputable sources, or two different types of sources, to see what is being said about issues. We know there's conservative and there's very aggressive ones. Read both, gather information and form an opinion. News journals, online, newspapers might be a thing of the past, but they still have online formats. That's going to tell you what's currently going on. And then all interviews, or most interviews, have an opportunity for you to ask questions. So ask questions, but make sure they're good ones. And what I mean by that is not something you can easily find online. Think about, questions about the faculty, or if you're speaking with the faculty, what are they doing? If you're speaking with a student, what are their interests? What has their experience been like so far? If you have an interest in research, what opportunities might exist, or if you saw an opportunity, how does one get involved? How does one have access to opportunities? What does daily life look like? Or anything else that is important to you when considering a school's program and a location. Remember that you'll be living here for 3 to 4 years, depending on the length of program. So what is important for you to know that you can't easily find? And also being able to turn this Q&A into a dialogue. The best interviews are that back and forth dialogue, not someone asking you a question and you giving a kind of a rote response. It is not uncommon in an interview for, especially with a faculty, that they ask you a few questions and then suddenly they start talking. And now you're not, your talking isn't that much because they're just going on and on and on. That's actually not a bad thing. That's actually a wonderful moment if that should happen. I know as an interviewee, you're like, but I just want to share. I'm here to talk about myself, and here's this faculty who doesn't stop talking. Why do you think I'm saying that? That's actually a positive. They're comfortable, they're excited. They've actually already formed an opinion about you, and it's a positive one. So now they're going on and on and on because they've already made their decision. Most interviews are honestly, an opinion is forming about you in the first few minutes. And that's when somebody's deciding, am I comfortable talking to this person? Do I like what they're saying? And especially with faculty, I know it's unnerving. I've had so many candidates come back and they're like, they wouldn't stop talking. I felt like I didn't get a word across. I'm like, because they liked you. They already liked you, and now they're just going on about things that matter to them. So if this should happen to you, take a big internal breath and go with the flow. If it goes off kilter where they're not really asking you a lot of questions about you and like it's random topics, go with the flow. The opinion has been made. It's positive. Have that conversation, have that dialogue, and not worry so much that they haven't asked me about this one thing I want to talk about. It's okay. And I want you to breathe through it and be okay with that. As I mentioned, you can be asked anything, right? Depending on what type of interview you're being presented with. Some can be really wide open questions where you're not sure, where do I start? And we'll chat about that. Some can be questions trying to ascertain your maturity or self-awareness. Something can be about current issues. Something could be about dedication. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? What do you hope to accomplish? What do you see as current challenges? Why do you want to even do this, knowing how hard it's going to be for you? And then about personal or academic challenges. So you all can Google and look up sample questions and think about how would you respond if you were presented with something. The goal isn't to memorize your answers. This isn't an opportunity for you to be completely rehearsed, but to understand if I'm asked a question about challenges or success or goals or ethics, what in my background might I bring up to help answer this? What might I focus on? It can be really challenging to think of responses on the spot. So you want to think of what would I bring up? And give me a second, and I'm going to circle back to this, but look up and Google sample questions, sample categories, and think of how you would prepare. So before we jump into content, let's talk a little bit more about presentation. Your first impression matters. And I know that there are some schools that are offering the opportunity for an in-person interview. Most schools are maintaining virtual So, it's really up to you. Regardless, your presentation and your attitude that you demonstrate is everything. There is confidence, there's ego, there's confidence, and there's the nerves got the best of me. So when we think about you at the interview, when we think about how you're presenting, you want to practice, how you're approaching, the handshake that you give, the smile. When I've interviewed, I actually always acknowledge, when they say, "How are you doing?" I'm really excited to be here. I am nervous, but I'm so excited to have an opportunity to speak with you. I address the elephant in the room. There's no way I'm not nervous, but I'm not going to let those nerves have power over me. So I acknowledge it and I work past it. You can, this positive self-talk and self-visualization, it is critical to how you present. If you let your head get the best of you, that's what you're going to show up with. There's, I'm so excited to be here. And I look forward to speaking with you all. Confident or not confident? Whether I'm in person or not, I have yet to make eye contact. Now, over a virtual environment, that's even more amplified. So, I am an introvert. I'm going to be completely honest. But if I have to pull out all stops, an interview is the time I'm going to do it. I'm going to center myself. I'm going to breathe in and I'm going to give them everything. I'm going to smile. I'm going to, it's an art form. It's acting. You practice this. My shoulders are back. I'm trying not to, be stiff or hunched over. I'm comfortable. I'm demonstrating relaxation. While I might be a bundle of nerves, big breath in before you go in and you hold it, to center yourself. If you've all done presentations, all of you, at some point or other in your undergraduate or graduate career or in work. So if you think about how you've prepared for presentations, it is the same thing, other than you're not creating a PowerPoint. You're practicing, you're thinking about your topics, you're thinking about how you present. Anthony, that's a really good question about hand gestures. This is where I suggest recording yourself. I am naturally a hand talker, and that can get the best of me. So I know that I exceed what's okay for hand talking. I actually, during an interview, keep one hand on my lap, and I actually will tap my leg under the table as a reminder to not go out of control with my hands. Otherwise, it starts looking like an interpretive dance. So you need to be aware, but there's other tips that you may have. And an actual interview isn't the time you want to discover them. So have somebody interview you. And with this practice we have next week and throughout fall, you can also schedule 30-minute appointments with HPA, use your friends and family, use mentors, but you want to figure out what are your tips. I once did a mock interview where I had someone answer confidently, but do this the whole time. That was their tip. Could you imagine listening to this for an hour? I even at some point was staring at his hand, like, please, for the love of God, just stop. Other tics people have that they don't know, right? You want to be aware of what your body does when you're not conscious of it. And so for me, I know I talk a lot with my hands. I will, as my hair different lengths, I play with it. I keep one hand on my lap. That's the reminder to keep it under control. But there are times where it's important to emphasize, right? You might have hand language. No one sits like this the whole time, right? No one sits like this. So be aware of that. And William, thank you for that question. I'm going to definitely talk about that. avoid slang and filler words. I've had to practice very hard to get ums out of my diction. I would rather you pause, slow down, enunciate. So don't speak any faster than you can say the word pronunciate or enunciate. I'm naturally a fast talker. I'm a storyteller. I can go a mile a minute. I can tell multiple stories at the same time. But imagine being the listener at the end of that, a listener who doesn't know you, a listener who might have to do multiple interviews in a day. It feels like being machine gunned at, right? So slow down. Slang is cultural, slang is generational, slang is also from different parts of the country. My slang is not the same slang as my spouse or his friends who are from the deep South. My slang is not the slang with my cousins from out of the country. So be mindful of that. Generationally, I mean, I always kid. I am the oldest person in my office. My peer advisors say something, and I'll be like, I need to know what that means. Can you tell me? And they'll do it right back to me. Wait, you said something. What does that mean? Other than if you're being interviewed by a student, most people are going to be older than you. And so be aware of that. Clear, calm, and confident. Slow it down. Fast talking can, for some people it's natural. I naturally talk fast. It doesn't mean I'm nervous, but it can present as nerves if somebody doesn't know me. Be kind, especially in person or virtual. You don't know what weight somebody has on your interview. The receptionist, the person scheduling your interview, can have as much weight as the person you're interviewing with. So don't let nerves get the best of you. Maybe something happened. Maybe the timing messed up. Maybe a link didn't work. Breathe, be calm. Don't take it out on the messenger because they will say something about you. Watch your nonverbal communication. I've sat with people and in the virtual format who've done this, unaware of it. Or they're shaking their legs and their whole body starts shaking. They're tapping their fingers. They're not making eye contact. And I know sometimes that can be cultural. I encourage you to practice. You don't have to stare somebody down. That's not an interview, but you do want to make eye contact here and there with the person you're talking with. I know that as I'm formulating an answer, I might look away and then I'm going to come back, smile, and respond. Body posture. Right? Nobody wants this person either, right? The person that's like so stiff and in your face. Mimic, but I'm short. I don't fit most chairs. I've learned I tilt my chair a little bit to the side. I lean one arm. I'm facing the person I'm talking to. You would never see anything different. You don't have to sit upright, lean forward, slouching. I've seen that. I've seen I'm trying not to genderize it, but the leg spread. Be mindful of your body. Be very mindful. Tall people tend to have more splayed body language. Short people, kind of because they're sitting at the edge of their chair. Practice sitting. Practice how you sit, how you stand, how you're putting out your hand for handshaking. Gestures and fidgeting. Make sure you figure out how your body's actually presenting. 60% of an interview is nonverbal. It's how you've presented your body. And so be mindful of that. To the question, William, I know that picture said clean shaven. Clean shaven doesn't mean no facial hair. Just make sure you're neat. Same thing, top to bottom. I like to use the words freshly showered, no scents. I've once sat interviewing someone who, I don't know what cologne they put on, but I have asthma. If I can't breathe, I ain't interviewing you well. Like, that's not okay. But we want to have everything trimmed. COVID hair, it's a thing, still exists. People kind of got a little slowed down on their haircuts. So it isn't about, it's just neutral appearance, clean appearance. Doesn't mean, you know, I have purple in my hair. You're not really going to notice it, but I'm not going to undye my hair. That's part of who I am. I would also think about, who am I interviewing with? I'm in California. We're very liberal. I interviewed with purple hair. I interview with a nose piercing. Doesn't bother me. I interview with a purple suit or a green suit, a lilac suit. I might be more conservative, maybe if I were interviewing on the East Coast, where it might be a little bit more formal, but you also want to consider this is a part of who you are. I would present, you know, you want them to see you as you are, professional. So if my color is fading, where the color isn't very pretty anymore, I might touch it up. I'm not going to undye it so I can present to what somebody else might think about me, but I'm going to have, you know, what's important to me. Questions. I don't do makeup either. Do you see anything? I think and I'm sick. If anybody needed makeup today, it was me. I might do it for a special occasion, but I would not start practicing on an interview. If you don't do makeup, not a big deal. You're not required to. Same thing with jewelry. Keep it tone and simple, regardless of gender. You know, don't wear anything big or jangly, anything that's distracting. I used to interview for Stanford Medical School. I had somebody wear, I don't know what they were. I call them chandeliers. Every time she moved, I'm like, sparkly, pretty. That's not what you want your interviewer to do. So put on your interview suit or outfit. See how you fit it. I did the cardinal rule of don't do's for an interview. I didn't try my suit on until 3 days before my interview, and I realized I still had baby weight on. And so there's me shopping in Macy's 2 days before my interview, trying to find something that fits my post-baby body, right? Try your suit on. Try sitting with it, try standing with it, or slacks or skirt or whatever you're wearing. Put it on your body. Make sure it fits if it's been a while. To the fully colored bright hair, if that's what's part of who you are, that's important to you, just make sure it's clean looking. So when my hair starts fading, when I used to bleach my hair to add more color, I start turning orange, like right as the purple starts fading, because my hair, if it's not, it fades to like reddish orange. That's not okay. But cleanly colored, yes, that's fine. So that's what I would encourage you. Go with that neutral. It doesn't mean change who you are. It means present it clean and well. So if you have bright hair and that's an important part of who you are, then keep your bright hair. We're a very diverse United States. If you're interviewing at a very conservative school, one, I would evaluate, why did I pick this school? Am I going to fit this school? If this is who I am and what's important to me, will I fit with them? Right? There's two sides. It's a dance, right? You're both wooing each other. In terms of clothes, I agree it is going to be school dependent. I don't need y'all to have the most expensive suit. I just need an outfit that fits you, and you only need one, right? Nobody knows what you wore to the school last week or the school yesterday. You need one outfit. Many people will wear suits for medical school and dental school and pharmacy school. I'm going to be honest. A jacket and or a blazer with bottoms, slacks or skirt, dependent on you. Shoes. So I would really say, if it's a very conservative school and it is someone who's important to you, you may be more conservative in your appearance, which might include a suit. I know East Coast is a little bit more conservative than us on the West Coast. So I would think about a jacket or a collared shirt, a button-down collared shirt. I would think about a blouse. I would think about how everything fits together. Shoes, same thing. Dress shoes might be helpful. Men's dress shoes and women's dress shoes look very different. Heels or no heels don't matter. I don't personally wear heels anymore. My feet hate me for all the heels I wore growing up. So I don't do that anymore. I wear nice flats. I interviewed once with a very bad knee. I'd hurt myself. My knee was swollen. So I chose slacks that time and I wore flats. Nobody cares. I'm short. I own my height. I'm not going to get any taller. So me putting on heels and clomping around isn't going to make things better. So think about that. You want to show your outfit to one of us, we're happy to see it. I once had a young lady like show me 4-inch heels. I'm like, and this was when interviews were in person. I'm like, you're going to be on your feet for 8 hours. I don't know how comfortable that's going to be. Anthony, good question. I will circle to that on the next slide in terms of content. But any other questions today? Right now we were talking about appearance. Anything else about appearance? And we have more time for questions at the end. But again, neutral. Neutral doesn't mean don't be who you are. I never take out my nose piercing. My hair stays colored. I minimize my jewelry. I don't wear bracelets, anything that's going to jangle or make noise. I do keep my watch on, but I'm cautious that I'm not doing this and looking at it. So you want to avoid anything that distracts you, that's going to distract the reader. The last thing that I'll say, if you do wear a suit jacket, and you happen to be in person or regardless, women's jackets are tailored to move with you when you sit down. So you are fine. They're meant to stay buttoned up. Men's jacket aren't meant to move with you when you sit down. So a trick a male colleague taught me is, as you're sitting down, if you're not in person, quickly unbutton the bottom button or two so that when you sit, the jacket hangs nicely in the portion that they can see you. If you're in person, shake hands, unbutton with your left hand. That will help your jacket hang straight. Otherwise, you're going to get this kind of bunchy thing going on. So that is the one trick that I learned, and to be mindful of. Be careful of current fashion. I have one rule. All the B's should be covered. We are not going clubbing. So just be aware of that. Please don't wear sneakers. That is a very good question. Solid shoes, not sneakers. And so be mindful of that. Anything else about presentation? And then we'll talk about responses. And I see a few direct messages, so I will also get to them. A question came up about saying or slow it down. I would, record yourself and count how many you're saying. If it's let's see, when I do like this, and like when we do that, if like and are every few words, that's too much. So practice slowing yourself down. I would rather you speak slowly and remove a few likes and from your conversation, because it can be super distracting if I'm trying to piece together between the likes and the what you're actually saying to me. You're not going to eliminate it overnight. It doesn't happen. But learning to be comfortable slowing down and pausing will help you remove those and likes. So let's talk a little bit about content. How do we give a solid answer? especially for behavioral or even situational. It's about the logistics of your answer. It's about how you lay it out. If you are a storyteller, you know that you're going to go off in multiple different directions. And then, I always do bring it back at the end. But for someone who doesn't know me, that's like, whoa, 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 what's going on? So you want to be very deliberate about how you're laying out your answer. And you want to back it up with assertions. So if we're getting a behavioral question or a situational behavioral, can you tell me about a time that you had to have a difficult conversation? Behavioral. What would you do in a conversation, a difficult conversation with your boss? Situational. You want to lay out a very formatted answer. It feels formatted. It's supposed to. It helps the listener understand. It lets you stay organized and not distract yourself. So briefly state the problem that you are being faced with or were faced with. Briefly speak about the actions you took. If you were part of a group, share what people did, but focus on yourself. What happened because of what I did? And depending on the question, if they're looking for a positive or a negative, it doesn't matter. They might be listening for, yeah, I messed up, right? So what happened because of what I did? And then at the end, what did I learn because of this? If appropriate, park can also be parka, the last A being application to the future. What would I do different? So I would follow this and keep yourself formatted. And this is the best way for you to keep yourself from derailing. Derailing meaning I started answering one thing and then I got distracted and I went off. Or I never answered the question. So if you went off, stop. Apologize, go back to where you last answered the question and continue. And be honest, don't keep going. If you know you left the train station and you went off on a dirt road, bring yourself back. Apologies. I started answering something different. Let me come back to what you asked me. So you were asking me about, and then continue your answer. Remember to answer the question that's being asked. Why do you think I'm emphasizing this? Why do you think this is important that I'm saying this? Not quite, Angelina, but good try. All of you, as you have interviews, people don't always answer the question. You all have something that's really important for you to share. You want this interviewer to know X about you. But what if they don't ask about that? And because it's so critical for you to know, for you to share about X, you just burst out with that response. I have seen this numerous times. People get carried away. They want to answer the question they prepared for, not the question that was being asked. So I want you to pause and think about what was being asked. I know you have something in you that you're like, I just want to tell them this. I just want to tell them this. But if they don't ask it, they're not asking to hear about it. Answer the question that's being asked. It doesn't make them feel like they're being ignored. It makes you look like you're not listening. Listen to the question. Repeat it to yourself if you need to. Answer what's being asked, nothing more. Not the question, not the answer you prepared that you so eloquently are ready to deliver, but the one you were actually asked. Within that answer, remember, competency-based application. Reveal without saying, I demonstrated customer service when I handled the challenge this customer prepared. No, don't name the competency. Show it to me. in your example. It's really hard to come up with examples on the spot. So going back to what I was saying, think about genres of questions: challenge, strength, success, failure, dealing with a difficult person, sharing different roles you've held. Think about all these different examples and what might fit different questions. So as you think about questions, I might have 1 to 3 examples depending on how a question was asked of me, what actual example I pull and share in the moment. That's going to keep you on track. That's going to make sure you answer the question that was asked, and that will give you the opportunity to pull the right example. It is hard to think on the spot, but show them who you are behind it. Show them that you listen, and show them you're the personality behind everything you've written so far. If you're asked about a failure or a weakness, that's what they want to know. They're not asking you to turn it into a strength. They're asking you to acknowledge why. Why is that critical? Why is it a good idea to turn that failure or weakness or challenge into a strength? All of those, all of those. For everything people put in the chat, if they're asking you about a failure, they're asking you about it because they want to know, one, you learned from it, you grew from it, you demonstrated resilience because of it, you acknowledged it, you were accountable to it. They're not asking you to say, oh, but then this happened and I was great. They also don't want health professional school to be the first time you fail in your life. They want to know you've dealt with something that was hard, whether a bunch of little things or a big thing, and that you got past it, and that those skills of getting past something difficult, whether small or big, you're bringing with you. If you looked at secondaries, you would have seen these questions asking about that, asking about some difficulty or challenge, whether small or big. They want to know you have these skills or you started developing these skills. And then if you try to make it a strength, they're like, you're not listening. That's not what we're asking. So practice, but be careful of that it's not about strength. It's about, what did I learn? That K, knowledge gain. What I realized was, or in this moment, I finally understood, or it helped me to see, just like with writing, I, me, my, talk about yourself. You can only speak about yourself. Do not stray into the you. When you want to help someone, you would do anything possible. Who is this mysterious you? I don't know who you is. In that moment, I knew what I wanted to accomplish. You can only speak about you. An interview is about you. So be mindful of that. Yes, Anthony, that is not wrong. That is part of the park up, right? Application to the future. What I learned was, so in a failure, good question, with a failure or weakness, that is the one thing you can add. Here's what I'm doing about it. So we're not repaired it, but here's what I'm doing about it. Here's what I'm learning and growing. So yes, you do want to highlight that you are working on it, especially with a weakness, right? A failure is a failure. I failed. Here's what I learned from it. In the future, here's what I would do different. A weakness is a weakness. One of the things I struggle with is, and don't pick something catastrophic, but one of the things I struggle with is public speaking. And I practice a lot. And I know every time I get a little bit better. Or I've joined communication clubs, or I purposely put myself in situations where I'm forced to present and get over my nerves. And I feel like I've improved a lot. I still have room to grow, but I'm improving every time. So Anthony, the way I focused on is it's working on it. It's in progress. I'm proud of the achievement so far. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. Think about your interview day, whether it's in person and virtual. And tomorrow we're going to spend a lot of time talking about virtual. But if you do happen to be going to an interview, plan everything. Don't leave anything to guesswork. How are you getting to transportation, from transportation to lodging, from lodging to the interview? What are you doing with your luggage? Does the school have a place for you to store luggage? Is there going to be a weather difference where you might have hefty clothing that you need to bring with you? Consider that with also shoes. How are you getting there? Communicate with the school about everything. And avoid surprises. You don't want to suddenly find out, your interviewer at different ends of the city. I had somebody realize that on the day of their main interview was on campus, but their second interview was with a faculty at his research center. And they were like, I didn't know how I was going to get there. So they were, this is slightly about when Ubers were starting, but they're like trying to figure out how to get a taxi in a strange city. Lodging, pre-pandemic, schools will usually put out like, here's places to stay. Some schools have the opportunity for you to stay with the current student, but make sure you're aware of every step of your journey and what's going on with you. Again, professional and meticulous. Try on your clothes, conservative. We're not looking for, it doesn't have to be trendy. My suits, you would never know how old they are because I keep very simple cuts. I have one or two trendy suits, but I also know trend comes and goes, whereas simple cuts stay with me. Body language, keep that in mind. Silence your phone. There's no reason for you to have a phone on. And with the phone, if you live in a universe where multiple things might beep, put everything in airplane mode, or even better, power it down. The last thing you need is parts of your body to start beeping unexpectedly. You don't need anything on you. You don't need a portfolio unless they've asked you to bring one. You don't need a bag or anything. Luckily, most male suits have pockets. All you need is a little cash or a card, phone off. Female suits don't always have that, a teeny tiny bag just to store the bare minimum. If you're interviewing in person and it's going to be a long day, I know I get the hangries super quickly. So I keep energy bars or nuts, something that's going to power me through until the school feeds me. And most, interviews might include a meal if you're in person, but be aware of that. I'm good for like 90 minutes. At that mark, I turn into a completely different person. And so restroom break, quick snack, because I'm not human anymore. But be aware of all that. And confidence. You can be nervous and confident. Don't let the nerves get the best of you. I mean, I'm so excited for everything that you're about to, it's nerve-wracking, but you have this. Practice. Do not wait till the week of the interview or the night before to practice because you've been too scared of it. Practice now. Practice continuously. We had a staff member a few years back who was applying to medical school. I used to, every time I walked by his office or he came to ask a question, he had to answer an interview question. Like I would just throw random things at him. We all did. And that's the best way to stay prepared, is to be prepared for the unexpected. Have your friends, family, make it a rule. Print out questions or text them questions. Say, ask me anytime. But the more comfortable you get talking about yourself out loud, the less nerves are going to get the best of you during the day of your interview. So I'm going to stop there.